Good evening, fans. Tim Kitzrow here, the voice of NBA Jam, and you're listening to the Game Dev Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by CodeWritePlay.com. Whoa, boom shakalaka!
My mom gave birth in 1985. I was bluer than a Pac-Man ghost, barely alive. In the Cold War, my only blanket was Tetris. I played Rampart with Reagan, rampage the world for breakfast. The laundromat was my sanctuary, the arcade was my church.
Hi Rob, can you hear me?
I can you hear me?
I can, perfect.
Excellent, how are you?
I'm fine, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. Yeah, I literally just got back from Warsaw yesterday, so I'm, catching up on emails and all of that kind of stuff.
Glad to catch you first thing back in the office.
Yeah, good stuff. It's good timing.
Tell me this before we get started. You're located in the UK, is that right?
Yeah, near to Manchester.
Okay, tell me this. Why do I only hear positive news come out of the UK game industry? And that's a serious question. Like, around here, there's always something negative to read about or see. You guys, not so much.
Well, that's interesting. It's interesting to hear that. I mean, we've been doing it for a long time, same as you guys, but we've got a slightly different history because we had different platforms at the beginning in the 1980s, and we didn't have, for example, the video game crash of '84. Just wasn't a thing here because we were on different platforms.
True.
So yeah, we've got a kind of rich history in it. I don't know why, in particular, we'd have only good news coming out, but I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we do have government support now these days, tax breaks for the industry, that kind of thing. So all that kind of stuff helps.
Well, that's one thing I want to get into. I want to talk about your background a little bit before we jump into the company in general. And but you've got to do some pretty interesting stuff. You've been around about 15 years professionally, give or take.
Yeah, 2005, so almost 15 years.
And what have you done, and who have you done it for?
Right, so I started a company called Blade Interactive, and we were doing at the time the World Snooker Championship video games. Snooker is not a big sport in North America, but it's pretty big in the UK and in China, actually. And so we did the official licensed snooker video games. So I did a series of those, and then did a game called Hydrophobia, and the company kind of changed names throughout that development to Dark Energy Digital. And that was published by Microsoft on the Xbox 360, and we had a really advanced fluid dynamics engine for the water physics in that game. And then we did a game called Pool Nation as well, which was still in development when I left Dark Energy and joined TT Games. And then at TT Games, I was a game director on a series of Lego titles, mostly for the handheld platforms for 3DS and Vita and iPad at the time. So I did Lego Lord of the Rings, Lego Awesome. Legends of Chima, Lego The Hobbit, Lego Batman 3, Lego Jurassic World, and Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens. And then started this company, Huey Games, in 2016.
So cool. I love that you got to work on the Lego stuff, and you were basically a game director?
Yeah, I was one of the game directors at the company. So there's usually several Lego projects in development at any one time, and each one of them would have a game director at the helm.
Obviously, that's so cool. They must have, by this time, had a pretty solid playbook built that you worked from. I mean, did you get to do a lot of creative stuff at all with these games, or was it pretty much locked into the formula of these games?
For the Lego titles, I mean, both. If I'm being honest, it depended on the title and how much time we had to produce it, because obviously we're often trying to hit a movie release in the theaters or a DVD Blu-ray release. So, you've got a very rigid time to stick to, because that's the business model, to match those releases. So let me think. Lord of the Rings. It was also the hardware, because Lego Lord of the Rings, for example, we were doing it on 3DS and Nintendo, the original DS at the time. And so we were doing it on a different engine from the console guys. We couldn't possibly, copy exactly what they were doing. So we got to be more creative, because we had to do our own versions, our own interpretations that would work on those platforms. So that was great fun. And Chima was a handheld only game, so there was no console version. So that was probably the one where I got to be most creative, because it was a Lego's own IP. There was a Cartoon Network TV series, and basically I got to pitch a storyline which took place between two of the seasons of the Cartoon Network TV series. So I got to go out to the Lego in Denmark and pitch my version of the storyline to them that I'd worked on with the team, and they loved it, and got to build that game completely from scratch. So that was one where it's very creative. Hobbit is a bit like Lord of the Rings, and at this point we were moving on the handheld side to doing more touchscreen focus. Mm-hmm. So it was completely different from the consoles, and I think Lego Marvel sort of pioneered that more touchscreen centric approach. So it was more of a kind of not isometric, but a kind of higher camera angle.
Sure.
And I had this idea, which I'd actually come up with in Lord of the Rings, again, that I worked on with the team, to do a different kind of world map, which was sort of like inspired by the Mario Brothers world maps, but on a kind of grander scale. So you had these nodes joined up by Lego pathways, and you could go down different paths and find different animations and all the different levels on that. And that was fantastic fun. So that was very creative. And then what came next? Batman, we were transitioning the way that we worked on the games and sort of moving more towards following consoles. I think we dropped the DS by this point, so it was only 3DS and Vita. So we were trying, we did do more of our own stuff on that, but we were starting to follow the console a bit more. And then by the time we got to Jurassic World, we were more or less just following the design of the console version. So that was a bit less creative compared to some of the earlier ones. And this continued onto Star Wars as well. And I think Star Wars Force Awakens, I left the company before that project had wrapped up. So it was, there were 2 or 3 months left to run on that. And my friend took over to finish that project after I left. So, so it kind of varied from project to project.
Yeah, and that's a really cool impact to have on the Lego game series in general. It's very interesting to me that you got that kind of experience, basically providing a similar experience for different platforms, because something I noticed when I look at the Huey Games site, you guys have a great track record of bringing games to like every major platform possible. And I was kind of wondering, what's your secret? Because a lot of indie developers and publishers struggle to do that.
Yeah, it was a struggle. So for Hyper Sentinel, we got it funded on Kickstarter. We have a fantastic retro gaming community which is connected to my dad was in the industry in the 80s, and he's got a sort of a following that were interested in the title. So we were able to fund it on Kickstarter, and we made the decision to go for a simultaneous release across all platforms, which was a lot of hard work. And of course, we do have the advantage of having been around in the industry a long time. We're able to, we've got a lot of contacts. We're able to talk to the platform holders, and we're able to get dev kits for all the platforms because we've got a track record, which is not necessarily the case if you're coming into, the indie scene fresh without that. Mm-hmm. So we had all the dev kits and basically just worked really hard and had to juggle different platforms, work with some contractors. We probably could have got the game out a lot sooner if we'd done a staggered release rather than simultaneous, but we went for the simultaneous release, and it probably meant that the game was more polished as well. So just, I think, having the luxury of a track record, hard work, and, the experience of having done it many times before is what it comes down to. Andrew
was your father. That's right?
That's right.
Okay, so he was sort of a living legend over there when it came to 80s and 90s stuff. So it's cool that he got, first of all, I'm assuming he got you into this as well.
Well, it's funny in a way. I mean, obviously I grew up with it, and I remember going to the warehouse where, his company used to duplicate their own cassettes, and cassettes were a much more popular format in the UK for things like the Commodore 64 than floppy disks for whatever reason.
Right.
And climbing amongst the cassettes and picking things to take home. my sister and I, and going to trade shows in London and seeing the launch of the Amiga CD32 and with Pinball Fantasies on it, which was one of their titles, and all of this stuff. So I certainly grew up around it. But he would say that he probably tried to discourage me from joining the industry because he knew how difficult it is, how much hard work and stress can be involved. But of course, we all want to do what we want to do. And it was my passion from a very early age to design games. And I actually remember sort of sticking bits of paper together on my living room floor and designing what I thought was a great game. And, saying, Dad, are you going to release this game that I've designed? And he sort of saying, yeah, sure. And then after sort of 2 or 3 weeks of me persisting, realizing, okay, he's not going to let this go, and having to let me down gently, that actually me drawing some pictures on a piece of paper was not quite sufficient for them to go and make the game. But, so I grew up around it, I suppose. But he would say he tried to discourage me. That's certainly what he says these days.
I love that, because I have a son and he's already seeing what I'm doing, and I'm sure he's going to want to get involved, and I'm sure I'm going to say, no, don't, do something else. Your mom's in medicine, go into medicine. That'd be fine. And I'm sure he'll want to do games as well. So, but this gives me hope because it looks like it's going well.
Yeah, it's great. I've been very fortunate. I've had a really fun career, and I can't imagine doing anything else. I mean, it's the best industry in the world to work in.
Very cool. So it looks like you guys were able to sort of relaunch with help from the UK Games Fund. Tell me how that works.
Yeah, so the UK Games Fund is over here is a government-backed organisation, and they provide grants to help get indie developers started, really. And so we pitched a game concept to them, and we were given a grant to help us build a prototype. And we're actually still working on that game, believe it or not. We're really ramping that up again now. So that was great. That really got us going. And because it's a grant, if you win it, that you get the money and you don't have to pay it back, which is very rare in this industry. So it's a fantastic organization, and I've gone on to work, help out that organization with some of their other programs, like their transfuser program, which is designed to help sort of student teams out of university to build prototypes. And I've been involved as an industry reviewer to help review and to help guide some of those teams for the first 3 years of that running. So it's been fantastic. It's really great. We're very lucky to have that support here in the UK.
Yeah, that's extremely nice that they were able to help you, and now that you're given an opportunity to help others along as well. I like to see that. Yeah,
and they've got a great community. I mean, I went along. We were nominated. They do an award ceremony each year, and we went along last October up to Dundee, and then there's the award ceremony itself, but also a day of kind of talks and panels and that kind of thing. So they're really doing a great job of supporting the UK industry.
You guys act as a publisher. You're getting these games from outside developers, or are you also doing some internal work? How does that work?
Oh, yeah, no, we're absolutely doing internal work. So Hyper Sentinel, I'd say we co-developed it with Jonathan Port. It was his game initially, and he's coming from couple of decades of experience as a programmer in the business software world, but as a gaming fan and as a fan of some of Dad's games from back in the day. And Hyper Sentinel, he was inspired by Uridium, which was a game Dad's company published in 1986, and he was inspired by titles like Defender and R-Type. And so, I met him at the Manchester Indie Dev Drink Meetup, which we have every month, and he showed me this game. Obviously, I saw the connection with the inspiration in terms of Uridium. I knew that would appeal to our community, who had already backed a book that we'd done on Kickstarter, which was, Dad's book telling the story about his career in the 80s and 90s. So I knew it would appeal to that community, and I said, look, let's work together on this. The game looks great. We can help you develop it. We can help you bring it to the consoles, because he was just looking at, to release it as an iPad game at that time. Mm-hmm. And, we can use our experience to help to really polish this game up to be as good as it can. So I guess we sort of co-developed that one with him and when we did the publishing. And we've also worked with James Lightfoot, another indie developer, to port his adventure game, The Mystery of Woolly Mountain, onto Nintendo Switch and to publish it for him there. So we do like to do a bit of that, but fundamentally, we are all the time working in the background on a couple of really exciting games. So we're building up our team. It was important for us to, with Hyper Sentinel, for example, to get a game out there. Get a game out there, get it under our belts, show that we're serious, show that we can do it cross-platform while we're working on these bigger projects, which are looking really exciting at the moment. So yes, we're very much developing, but doing a bit of publishing as well.
And it sounds like the momentum is definitely building and things are looking very good. You guys are clearly skilled in doing Kickstarter funding. It looks like you've had several very successful projects there.
Yeah.
When I saw that you guys were doing a cassette tape, USB drive, I guess it looks like, for one of the games, I thought, that is so cool. And when I looked it up, I went, I know what they're getting at, but I have to actually look up, like you said, what systems it was common to have cassette games, because it wasn't as common over here at all.
That's right. Yeah.
And I thought, what a cool thing to have. I would still order one of those in a heartbeat,
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it was the Kickstarter for Hyper Sentinel. We had this, I had this idea of doing the USB cassette because, I remember from my childhood, all the games on the systems here, which was the Commodore 64, which I know you guys had over in North America, but also the ZX Spectrum, which was a huge system over here, which was, very much a British system.
Right.
And almost all the games were on cassettes until well into the 90s. It was cassettes. And so I knew that would appeal to our audience, it is UK centric, because obviously back in those days, they were really separate markets. It wasn't the global world that we have today. Mm-hmm. So we were shipping games all around Europe and Australia and so on, but not so much in the US. And they're in Canada a little bit, but not so much in the US. A few games went out there, but so I knew it would appeal to that community. So we did it for Hyper Sentinel, the collector's USB cassette. And over here, we have a fantastic, thriving retro scene where we have meetups all the time. And it was such a huge formative thing for people who are now sort of in their 40s or 50s, who have massive collections, in their basements or in their attics of cassettes from the 1980s. Whereas you might find collectors over there have got cartridges, in their retro gaming collection. We've got collectors over here with shelves and shelves of cassettes as well. And so I knew that this USB cassette format would literally slot right into their existing collections. And it's almost a continuation of, okay, you played Hewson games in the 80s. Here we are, we're back as Huey games now, and you can continue collecting games that we've done. And so after we did that with Hyper Sentinel, and I saw how much enthusiasm there was for it, after we did Hyper Sentinel as a strictly limited box release on PS4 with the Strictly Limited team, I thought, I see what Strictly Limited are doing here. Them, a bit like limited run games. They're giving a path for games that were previously only digital releases to have a limited physical run. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, we can do that for PC, Mac games. But rather than doing it on a boring old, DVD or whatever, let's do it as a collector's USB cassette, because it's so cool, it's so retro, and the games that we're doing it with are all neo-retro games, and we're doing a whole series of them, and it slots into the people's collections here in the UK, so people are going crazy for them, and it has the advantage of we can put a whole bunch of bonus features on the USB drive. So we've got, the developer diaries, documentaries, soundtracks, artwork. So it's a really fantastic way of doing that kind of physical, a limited physical run in a unique format.
And what a nice treat for people in an increasingly digital scene. A lot of people don't have anything to show for their games anymore at all. So
that's right, absolutely. And so the first one we're doing, it's live on Kickstarter right now. It was funded in 48 hours, and it's a game called Droid Assault from developers called Puppy Games, who do a lot of neo-retro games. And Droid Assault was inspired by one of the most cherished Hewson titles from the 1980s, a bit like Hyper Sentinel was. And so, it's great to work with the Puppy Games guys and other developers moving forwards. And for them, it's we're basically saying, look, we're going to do all the work, and you're going to get some money, and you're going to get a boxed version of your game that was previously only digital. So it works for them as well. So we're really excited about it.
Yeah. You brought up a good point. They were completely separate markets for a long time, over there and over here. And I've had an opportunity. For one thing, I had never heard of the Spectrum at all until I was a grown up.
Yeah.
I was well into my 20s when I heard about it, and I thought, wow, it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Very much like our Commodore 64, a lot of people started their career learning to make their own little projects on these computers.
Yes.
So there are a couple of really good books about that time, and I'm glad you guys have one as well. I've read most of the one about Ocean.
Yes.
There's a very good book around about that. You mentioned R-Type earlier. There's a good sort of an indie book by Robert Pape, who did one of the ports for R-Type straight from the arcade, and he worked on a Rampage port also. I think that book was called It's Behind You.
Okay, right.
A goof on one of the old advertisements.
Yeah, brilliant.
What is the name of you guys' book?
So it's called Hints and Tips for Video Game Pioneers. And the reason it's called that is because actually the way Dad got started in the industry in 1980 was he wrote, before the ZX Spectrum came out from Sinclair, they had released the ZX80, then the ZX81 in 1980 and 1981. And instead of it being the ZX82 in 82, because it had colors, they called it the ZX Spectrum. That's how it went. And Dad got started by writing a book in 1980 called Hints and Tips for the ZX80, which was, a programmer's hints and tips, which was, when I say a book, I mean, he'd written it. My mother, who was pregnant with me at the time, had typed it up, and they'd gone to a photocopying, a print shop with a photocopier in it, and photocopiers were new and exciting in 1980. And they photocopied the whole book and stapled it together, and they sold it via mail order by taking out tiny ads in computing magazines. So, that's what I mean by a book.
Sure.
And then he did Hints and Tips for the ZX81. And so we thought, wouldn't it be cool to come back all these years later and to talk about the history and call it Hints and Tips for Video Game Pioneers? So it's quite a personal story. It talks about, Dad's whole journey through the industry, but it also has commentary and analysis from more than 20 retro gaming icons, including many of the developers, some of the journalists who were writing in the magazines around the time. It's been very well received and very popular. So we're really proud and happy of that. It's been great.
I love that because it's great. There's so many good stories from that time period. I mean, like the story about the book itself is very good. Nothing was easy back then. Everything was very difficult.
Absolutely. That's right. It's a cool story. I mean, basically what happened after that is he'd written these books, and then somebody phoned him up and said, we're starting a magazine called Sinclair User, which is going to be, you've got the ZX Spectrum was just about to come out, so they're starting a magazine called Sinclair User. Hey, you've written these books. Do you want to write a column in the magazine? And, he said yes. And the column was called Hewson's Helpline. The company he'd started was called Hewson Consultants because he'd previously done some statistical consulting work for people. And people who read the magazine, and he wrote his column in every issue that there ever was of that magazine for 11 or 12 years, and people who read the magazine started sending him cassettes and saying, oh, do you want to publish my game? And he said, oh, I didn't know I was a games publisher, but apparently I am, so off we go.
Tell me, has he sort of kept up with the changing development technology at all? Like, does he know anything about Unity? Does he still do it for fun? What's going on?
No, not really. His second company was 21st Century Entertainment, which did games like Pinball Dreams and Pinball Fantasies, which you might have had a bit more in the US.
Sure.
And they closed that company in 1998, I think. And I think by that time, he was a bit kind of burnt out. If you read the book, you'll hear how he was really burnt out. And, the first company he had gone bust, and, it had left its sort of scars on him. And he kind of just wanted to leave and do something else and move on with his life for a while. So he went and he went into internet development and had a company doing web software in the early 2000s. And then he started an accountancy company, which is still running now, that he's passed on to my brother-in-law, and he's just retired. So no, he hasn't really kept up with the industry because he just wanted to go and forget about it until, of course, I came and started dragging him back into it by sort of suggesting he write this book. So now he's getting sort of half dragged back into it, thanks to me.
Well, that seems to follow the recipe for any living legend. They eventually, it drives them a little bit crazy, and they decide to do other things for a while.
Absolutely. Well, Dad and I have literally just returned from Warsaw in Poland, where we were invited to speak at Pixel Heaven 2019, and there, amongst many other great speakers, was David Pleasance, who was the managing director of Commodore UK, telling exactly this story about all of this, how he did the Commodore 64 and the Commodore Amiga, and how, from his perspective, the management of Commodore International had no business plan and didn't know what they were doing, and how, eventually he got fed up with it and he just left the industry and went to Australia, started a restaurant, and forgot about it until, a couple of years ago, somebody dragged him back into it and convinced him to write a book. So I think it's quite a common story.
Yeah, it reminds me also of Ken and his wife Roberta Williams of Sierra Online.
Right.
When they did all their stuff and then they decided to just buy a boat and sail around the world and write books. Like that was their life for a long time. I don't think they ever went back to it. It's very fun to hear about what all these big industry players end up doing, because it gives us hope that we can one day leave it all behind as well.
This is true. Yeah, this is true. It's an interesting, it's a potent mix of, when you're in it, it's the best thing in the world. But when it goes wrong, it can, especially in those days, people, really got burnt by it.
Oh yeah.
They can just it can get quite stressful and they just want to leave it all behind.
Who is the third founder on your site? I'm sorry I don't have his name in front of me.
So that's John Ogden. So he's our technical director. So I worked with John for 6.5 years at Blade and Dark Energy before I went to TT, and he went to the BBC, and he actually worked on the iPlayer, video streaming app on game consoles there, I think. And so we'd worked together before, and he's our technical director, and he's got 17 years of experience of building graphics and building game engines from the ground up, before Unity came along, for example. So he knows his stuff.
I looked at his description online, and I didn't really know BBC had that much cutting edge technology stuff to work on, but they seem like they do pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean they do. I think the main thing he did was they have a streaming app, as most of the TV channels do these days, and so he was leading up the team that was getting that streaming app onto PlayStation and Xbox here in the UK. So it's called BBC iPlayer, their streaming app. So I think that was the main thing he did there. But they do other stuff, they do VR things and various other bits and bobs. But they're quite a strange and unique organisation because they have this kind of state charter of responsibility. So it's they're not a typical capitalist organisation.
Right. I think that's what it is, because I hear about them, I see certain products of theirs I like, and I think that's cool, but I feel like I can never get a hold of exactly what they're doing,
Yeah, they're funded. The BBC is funded basically by the people here in the UK, and they're not allowed any commercials. They're not allowed to. They have to represent things in a balanced way and try and represent the news, for example, in a non-biased way. So it's supposed to be giving people something they can trust that hasn't been bought by
Sure.
where the opinions haven't been bought by somebody. So that's the kind of the concept.
Very cool stuff. So when it comes to the publishing process for you guys, you mentioned you work with contractors. Like, what do the teams end up looking like when you're really in the thick of it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the project. So on Hyper Sentinel, we worked with, we had a guy come in to do the music for the game. That was Fractures Audio. Rob Fenn, and we worked with another former colleague of ours, John Reynolds, who helped with porting the games to some of the consoles. And we've worked with other friends of mine on audio for our new games. We work with, I'm commissioning various artists at the moment to work on some of the games we're working on. So it depends on the project. And of course, what we're building towards at the moment is we're building these exciting new games where we're working very closely behind the scenes with some big publishers, closing in on hopefully doing some deals and building building a bigger team moving forwards.
And that's something I wanted to learn as well. I mean, you guys are off to a great start, but I'm wondering, how do you want to end up? Do you want to make it a much larger team and get to do, hopefully even bigger stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the aim is to make it a bigger team. I think our objective is to have a team which is big enough to do some really. I hate the term triple I, but that's we need a better term. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Triple I games. A team that's big enough to do that, but not so big that it becomes impersonal and you need to put a load of kind of bureaucracy in place, because I've experienced that as well, and it's great and it works for certain projects. But the thing that I've always loved is working with a sort of small to medium sized team where everybody, you're all huddled together, and you just having a great time making games together without having to go through layers of bureaucracy and get sign off from all sorts of different departments and what have you.
Yeah,
there's a sweet spot size that we're aiming for, and we'll know what it is when we get to it, I hope. But I've got an idea in my head.
Yeah. And did you get to work on relatively small teams earlier in your career? I mean, the Lego stuff seems like it required more help, but...
Yeah, so when I was at Blade and Dark Energy, those were relatively small teams. I think they were probably 20 or 30 people most of the time, which is great because you go and have a beer at the pub together, you're in the trenches together, and I would probably change a lot of things about how things were run and when I'm doing it myself, but
sure.
Yeah, it was smaller teams. I mean, at TT Games they were significantly bigger teams, but a lot of the time, because I was working on the handheld projects, they weren't enormous teams. They maybe would sort of ramp up towards 40 or 50 people, but as a whole, the company is much bigger. And so there's much more of a process in place in terms of different levels of management and what have you, which is great. It was a fantastic experience, and it's absolutely appropriate for what those guys are doing. And I really enjoyed it. But yeah, I think for what we're trying to do, we're looking for a kind of a different thing.
Yeah. And I mean, did you get to maintain, you hear all the horror stories throughout the industry. Have you maintained a pretty good quality of life while you've been on the job?
No, I mean, I've certainly got some horror stories, but I'm one of those people where I'll talk about the horror stories amongst the people that I went through it with, and perhaps with some other trusted people in the industry. But I don't like to talk too much about it more publicly, because I don't think it's necessarily fair on people that were involved. There's just no point. But I certainly have gone through plenty of horror stories. But yeah, after a beer or two with people who are there with us, I talk about them. But yeah, I try not to. I mean, really, you just want to get on with things, don't you? You just want to move on and do cool things rather than dwelling on stuff that you think, well, that was bad and that was wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I should just say as well, I don't want to imply that there's anything bad about companies I've previously worked at. I mean, TT Games is a fabulous company and brilliantly organized, and they look after their people well, for example. So just to be clear about that.
Yeah. And to be fair, there's good hustle and there's bad hustle. I mean, like in your father's time, I'm sure he looks back and thinks, yeah, I worked extremely hard at this, because it's just the nature of the thing. If you want to, sometimes we're in the Wild West and we have to sort of make it work.
Absolutely. There's a difference. Somebody once told me there's a difference between pressure and stress. Pressure is something that's always going to be there and that is sometimes needed to really get you going. But when things are overly stressful or things aren't being done in the appropriate way, that's a different story. But I think I've been fairly fortunate. I've certainly been through some tough ones, but on the whole, I'm still here and I'm still passionate about it. I do know people who have left the industry and gone, I'm not doing this anymore.
Sure.
I've had enough of this. This is not for me. So I must have had a relatively good experience to still be doing it.
Absolutely. Something I love about the Huey games, I don't want to call it marketing, but some of the stuff you guys discuss on the website is the desire to sort of identify up-and-comers in the industry and foster a relationship with them, much the way, your dad's team did. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that's clear about the indie developers in general is we do need to work together. And you meet a lot of people who are perhaps not familiar with the games industry, and they come in and they're like, you guys are telling each other everything, you're telling each other how your secrets and what works, and talk to these people, don't talk to that people. In the industry I come from, we would never dream of sharing these things with people who are technically competitors. But that's a nice thing about the games industry. I think people do appreciate that it's tough, and the way that we all get through it is to actually help each other. And that's the way you get a good reputation as well, because nobody is going to want to work with you again if you've been kind of a bit cutthroat about things. So I think I really like it, and I think that's to be encouraged, because it's really not easy. It's not easy at all doing indie development. It's super tough, and I hate to say it, but most people are going to fail. It's just the nature of the beast. There's far too many of us doing it, trying to do it for everybody to survive. So let's not make it worse by not sort of sticking together.
I agree. We do such complicated stuff technically, and there's so much to it. And I think there's room that we can sort of help one another along and still come out with just drastically different products and offerings.
Absolutely.
And I can't think of many stories where somebody gave away what they were working on technically and ended up, burned by it.
No, well, I mean, the thing is, it's you've hit the nail on the head there. I think video games as a medium probably offer the broadest set of experiences compared to any other medium. I mean, when you think about, I don't know, let's say you've got Candy Crush Saga on the one hand and you've got Red Dead Redemption on the other. They could not be more different as experiences, but both of them are massively successful. And you just don't have that equivalent in movies or music or, the end products. Okay, you've got different genres and what have you, but those are totally different experiences, totally different scales, but both hugely successful. And so there's a massive breadth of possibilities for people to produce. And as you say, technically, what developers are doing is massively complex. So the idea that someone's going to steal your idea, I mean, no, it's because they'd have to actually build it. Right. And as we all know, ideas are the easy part. Execution is the real tricky part.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence this was on my mind, because I was just working on a personal project, and it crossed my mind that I had just interviewed someone on the podcast who was working on a similar framework, and I got in touch with him and I said, And I felt bad because he was just talking about having a really hard time gaining traction in like the Steam store and on Nintendo Switch, for example, stuff like that. And I said, I feel weird asking this, but would you mind letting me know a couple of things just as I get this project started with this framework? And not only did he answer those questions, he goes, I actually have a whole video series about exactly how I built these projects. And you can go check that out. And not only that, but on the website of the framework itself, they said, by the way, there's this video series, and it was his video series. And I thought, that's how good these guys are about doing this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great. It's a really nice industry in that sense. Everyone's very, very friendly and very willing to help each other. It's still tough. It's tough no one's going to give you a free ride, but people are more than willing to point you in the right direction.
Speaking of the publishing side, do you think you've had a significant advantage that's sort of spread out over all of your projects because you are sort of acting as a publisher for yourselves and for some other developers also?
I mean, I think it certainly gets people's attention. You know, when I tell people that we self-published Hyper Sentinel across all platforms and tell people, how small our team is, it raises eyebrows and people think, wow, these guys are, doing this development work, but they're also able to do the publishing. And I think it's us saying, look, we're a veteran team. We know what we're doing. We've done this before, and we can execute across a broad spectrum of disciplines, which not everybody can do. So yeah, it's a way of sort of proving ourselves. And that was one of the reasons we wanted to get a game out quickly, just to say, look, here we go. We've got a game out. We've done the whole thing across all platforms, and now we're on to the next thing. So it just establishes a reputation. And that is, I think, crucial. If you're starting out as an indie, ship something. Get something out the door. Because the sooner you get something out the door, the sooner you've got a reputation, you've got something to point to, you can start to make money from it. And we're still finding ways, more than a year on, we're still finding new opportunities to make money from Hyper Sentinel, for example, which we didn't plan for at release. But once you've got a product out there, you've got something to sell. So you got to ship something when you're indie. Make sure it's good, make sure it's polished, but ship it.
I think that's fantastic advice because I love indie games. I love indie developers and I enjoy supporting them. But you do, when you look at someone who has a little bit of a record established and they've had a successful project or two, you do feel a lot better clicking that purchase button because you think it's not always fair because there are a lot of fantastic developers who haven't gotten to release something, but you do feel like this is probably going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not just like you say, from a consumer point of view, that's the case, but also within the industry when you're talking to people, one of the first things they're going to ask is, okay, what have you guys done? So this is what we've done.
Yeah, it would definitely help as a developer speaking to a potential publisher also, like, hey, here's what we've done. I'm going to feel much better having that conversation,
Absolutely.
Has Kickstarter been helpful in terms of building a community for your games?
Yeah, I mean, Kickstarter's great. I mean, we've got a particular community that's still quite heavily focused on the retro side of things because we started off with that book, as I mentioned. And it's a great platform for us. Is it enough to fund the entire cost of developing a game? Not for us at the moment. But is it enough for us to do some cool things like the collector's USB cassette series? Yes, there's an opportunity there. So that's the way we look at it. We say, okay, we got some money towards Hyper Sentinel development, but it wasn't anything like enough to cover the cost of development. But we've got this fantastic community on Kickstarter. What is suitable from the point of view of being something that community would be excited about, but also something that makes sense from a business point of view. And that's where the collector's USB cassette comes in. And it's got off to a flying start. So we're really, really happy and excited about that. And it's something that we can keep doing. And we've already been, putting a survey out to our fantastic backers and getting their input on how to move this series forward. And we've got some great data there. So it's a really great way to keep in touch with your community as well.
Yeah, and in terms of other locations for communities like Steam, I mean, it's impressive that you guys are doing very well with those audiences that don't necessarily know a lot about your extensive background. Like those games are performing very well. It seems like review scores are high. It seems like it's going pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the crucial thing, isn't it? If you've gotten if you're able to build yourself an existing community, and we were very fortunate and lucky to have that launch pad in terms of the retro side of things, and we very much fostered that. Obviously, you want to nurture that community and care for that community and deliver those guys the stuff that they want, but also you're looking to use this as a launch pad to reach an even broader audience. And so that's what we've looked to do, and it's worked well with Hyper Sentinel and with Woolly Mountain. We have people playing the games who've know nothing about that but are really excited about it. In fact, one of the nice things about the retro events here in the UK, particularly when we've shown Hyper Sentinel, is you get people coming along in their 40s and 50s who are like, oh, I remember your dad's games from the 80s, and then they bring their kids along and stick them on Hyper Sentinel, and actually simple retro gameplay really appeals to the kids as well. They're like, this is great, I can jump in and start blasting stuff, this is great fun. And they get caught up in the emotion of it as well, so you do reach a whole new audience. And we've had things like Indie Select with Indie Gamer Chick and stuff like that to really broaden the reach of the games, and had some fantastic feedback there. So we're lucky. We're building things out steadily and reaching some cool audiences. And I've got to say, James Lightfoot with The Mystery of Woolly Mountain on Switch, he did his own Kickstarter campaign, and he had Ron Gilbert as a backer. So you can't get much better than that for a point and click adventure game. So the developers themselves, the smart ones like James, are doing that kind of stuff as well.
I love that, and I'm glad you brought up Indie Gamer Chick, because she was sort of indirectly responsible for us speaking. A Patreon supporter and a fan, Mark Feller, wanted to sort of hear from her, and she wasn't available to do any podcast stuff, but she recommended that we get in touch with you guys. So,
oh yeah, that's right. I'd actually forgotten. Of course,
I had to until that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So we worked with the Strictly Limited guys, who as I'm sure you know, they do limited run physical games. Sure. Based out of Germany, and we did the Hyper Sentinel PS4 run with them. And as part of the campaign for that release, they were the ones who suggested working with Indie Gamer Chick for Indie Select. So that's how I first sort of developed that relationship. And then now we've got Droid Assault running on Kickstarter. I said to her, "Look, can I get your feedback on? I know you know a lot about Kickstarter campaigns. Can I get your feedback on the campaign? Is there any way you could, perhaps work with us to support it?" And she was brilliant. She gave us fantastic feedback. She loved the campaign, and she said, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's do the first ever Kickstarter Select." And so we had codes for not only Droid Assault, which is what the Kickstarter campaign is focused on, but some of our other games. So we're able to get exposure for them as well. So it's been absolutely brilliant. And the Kickstarter was funded in 48 hours, as I said. It's still live at the moment, so if anybody listening wants to check it out, it's tinyurl.com/cassette001. We'd love to get you involved in building this new series of physical collector's games.
So, I mean, that was such a cool networking opportunity, because just a person connected to a person connected to a person, and then everybody got to everybody wins. I love that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it's all about. That's another thing, being an indie developer, you try and go to as many events as you can. And a lot of I always, there's this typical cycle when you're going to events. You think, oh, I've got to go and catch a train, or I've got to go and catch a flight. And you think, is it, as much as I'm going to enjoy going to this event, from a business point of view, is this really worth it? Am I spending too much money? Is this the right thing? But 99% of the time, something will come out of it serendipitously, some connection, some contact, some piece of advice where you think that was totally worth it. So I always try and remember that and try and try and attend and say yes to as many things as possible, because networking is absolutely critical. And sometimes it's the events that you are least excited about, or from a business point of view, least expecting results from, that actually deliver you that key contact or that key takeaway piece of expertise. So network, and of course, as you say, we can network online. I've never had the pleasure of meeting Indie Gamer Chick or yourself, indeed, in real life, but we've got the internet now, so we can network that way too.
That's right. And it's encouraging to hear you say that you have a lot of the same feelings I have before an event, like, I gotta work out this schedule, get up early, travel. And it doesn't always feel like something you want to do, but ultimately it is anyway.
That's right. Yeah. You come back the other end, you're like, oh, I'm so glad, that was brilliant. I'm so glad I went. And I'm feeling that, as I said, I've just got back from Pixel Heaven in Poland. So I'm feeling that at the moment, because it was a fabulous event and we met some great people.
Yeah. What are some of the big trade shows and events in your area?
So from a consumer point of view, the public events are, in the UK, we've got EGX and EGX Resd. In London, we've got the more retro-focused ones. We've got Play Expo, we've got Revival, and we've got Insomnia. So those are all in the UK. Of course, there's Gamescom in Germany, which isn't too far for us. There's Reboot, Develop, and Nordic, and from an industry gathering point of view, we have Develop Brighton here in the UK, which is kind of like a tiny version of GDC, I suppose.
Sure.
But it's where all the British developers go every July to connect together. We've got Pocket Gamer London, and what else? I'm sure I'm missing some others as well. But and there's retro events across Europe, huge retro scene here. And then when we go out to North America, we go to GDC most years, and been to PAX before, been to E3. So it's you have to pick and choose. Yeah. Based on what you're doing, and as much as you'd like to go to every event, you do have to think about suitability and cost. But it's always worth going.
Absolutely. And speaking of retro, do you guys think you're going to stay retro, or are you going to do some more modern game development in the future?
Both. So the two big titles that we're really excited about, one of them is what we're calling neo-retro. So Hyper Sentinel was neo-retro in the sense that it's inspired by the retro style of games, but it's not a retro game. It's a modern, contemporary version of that, because we could never possibly have run on any of the retro hardware. Sure. For example, but so we've got one game which is a neo-retro style game, which we're massively excited about. It was revealed as part of the Kind of Funny Games showcase last year. So that's Wreck Out, which is kind of a mashup between Arkanoid and Rocket League. So that's a kind of esports neo-retro title. And the other game, Mechanus, is much more of what you might say is a modern title, and a next-gen title. We're massively excited for that. That's our big project, and we can't wait to be able to show that, but we want to show it when the time's right. Very cool.
So as we sort of draw to a close here, where should people come check your work out and follow along?
Yeah, so the website is hueygames.com, Huey, by the way, for Huey. And on Facebook, we're facebook.com/HueyGames. On Twitter, we are Huey_games. And we're on Instagram as well. So, and as I said, the Kickstarter is tinyurl.com/cassette001. So come and check out what we're doing. We'd love to hear from you guys, and thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely. This has been very cool to get to learn about what you guys are doing, and consider me a new fan.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You as well. Thank you.
Cheers.
All right. Thank you to our guests. If you enjoy the Game Dev Breakdown podcast, you can subscribe at iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, anywhere podcasts are found. If you want to go further, you can check out what we're doing at patreon.com/CodeWritePlay. Look at some opportunities that our listeners get that nobody else gets. Follow the fun at CodeWritePlay.com, where we post show notes and more fun stuff, and we're always working on new shows to bring you, new articles, new site content, you name it, so keep an eye out. We'll talk to you soon.
Mario and Ken were throwing the sign peace. America was playing real like Zaxxon in the Middle East. But no matter how much my neighbors said the world would end, I was determined to play Missile Command till the end. I wasn't your normal child who played with yak backs and crayons, cause I liked how that trackball felt like the world in my hands. Each star was a space invader, the sky was Galaga. Every day was a boss fight, the soundtrack was Metallica. This was back when the only snakes in my life were on Cupid and video game